Today we're starting a new unit called Soils, Rocks, and Landforms. This is Investigation 1, which is Soils and Weathering, and Part 1 focuses on soil composition. When we talk about earth materials, they are the various solids, liquids, and gases that make up the earth. So the first question I want you to think about is, where would you find soil? Now this would be something that we might do if we were at school. We might go outside and look around to see the different soil. But I want you, if you have some time and can, to go outside in your neighborhood, in your yard, and look around for soil. And as you're doing that, I want you to think about these questions. Where did you find soil? And what was its location? And if you could see it pretty well, what does it look like soil is made of? Is soil the same in every location? So maybe you found some soil in your front yard. Maybe you found some soil in your backyard, side yards. Maybe you have a flower garden. Do you see any patterns? And think about, why might geologists and other people be interested in studying soil? So what actually is soil? That is our focus question. So I want you to write that down somewhere, because I will ask that you answer that question and submit it to me after the lesson. Sounds pretty simple. What is soil? So for our first procedure, we will have a paper plate, and each of the plates will have its own number that matches the vial. So there'll be a paper plate number 1, a vial number 1, paper plate number 2, a vial number 2, and so on. So what you will see happen is I will pour out each of the soils onto the matching paper plate, and then observe the soil, and then I record the properties of each soil. So what do I see? All right, for step 3, we're going to pour out the different soils onto a paper plate, look through them, and write down what we see. So this is soil number 1, putting it on a plate number 1. So dumping it out. I got a spoon, we can move it around a little bit. Well, I definitely see like really fine clay type. And if I move it around, oh, there's a little bit of small rocks going on. It kind of sounds like sand. Maybe that's the rocks on it though. Yeah. I think that's might be all that I see in number 1. Oh, that looks like a little piece of stick. All right, so I'm going to record what I see on soil number 1 on the soil number 1 spot. So clay, small rocks, sand. Looks like a little piece of stick. I don't know. All right, moving on to soil number 2. 2 on plate 2. Make sure we're doing it right. Whoa, got some big old pieces of rock going on. All right, let's see here. Looks like got sand for sure. Small rock, a little bit bigger pieces of rock. Maybe a little bit of soil, or not soil, clay. I'm gonna record that on soil number 2. So sand, small rocks, whoops, bigger rocks, clay. I think that was it. Okay. Soil number 3. 3 on plate 3. Around. Looks like clay, sand, and small rocks. Very similar to number 1, but it just seems like it has a little bit more of the smaller rocks. Okay. Soil number 3, clay, sand, small rocks. And soil number 4, last but not least, 4 on plate 4. Ooh, now we have some darker material going on. Good. All right, so I don't know what to call that. I mean, I want to call it dirt because that's what we call it, so maybe that's what I'll call it. So we got some dirt and pieces of sticks, small rocks, large rocks. I don't think I see any sand. I don't know. Yeah, maybe a little bit in there. I don't think there's any clay though. Okay, soil number 4. So sand. I'm just going to call it dirt because I'm not sure what we should call that. Small rocks. Pieces of stick. Sand. Some of the different materials that I saw in the soils were clay, sand, small rocks, large rocks, like little pieces of sticks, some dark material that we might call dirt that we see outside. Now you can see we could call these different materials what their names are. So any dead plant or animal material that becomes part of the soil is called humus. So those dark pieces, those things that are floating, so dead plants like the sticks, anything that is decomposed that's an animal and it becomes part of the soil, it's called humus. So the dark material. So we don't call that dirt, we call that humus. And then the different rocks have different sizes. So as you can see, a pebble would be 6 to 64 millimeters. So that's the bigger pieces of rock that we saw. Gravel is 2 to 6 millimeters. Sand is 1 to 2 millimeters. Silt is less than 1 millimeter. And clay is invisible to the bare eye. So the next part of the investigation will add water to the soil. So I put the soil back into the correct vials. 1 went into 1, 2 into 2, and so on. I added 25 milliliters of water, put the cap on, shake them for 1 minute, and then let them sit for 3 minutes and see what happens when we add water to it. So we're going to look at the water added to the different materials, and I wanted you to be able to see the top of it before I put the lid on. So looking at soil number 1, you can see that there's bubbles. You can also see that there's some black material floating on the top that I didn't see when I looked at it when it was dry. Soil number 2, same thing. You got a little bit of bubbles going on in the edge there and some black material on top. Soil number 3, not as many bubbles, but there's some black material floating. So I didn't even see that in 1, 2, and 3 when we were looking. And then soil number 4, of course, we had a lot more black material going on. Not quite as many bubbles. So now we're going to put the lids on. I'm going to shake for about a minute, each one. Okay, I'm going to place soil number 1 into the holder. And I'm going to place soil number 2's lid on and do the same thing. Soil number 3 lid on, do the same thing. Soil number 4 lid on, do the same thing. So after the vials were shook, you can see that the different materials settled. And so think about which materials settled first down at the bottom. Where's the humus? Kind of see that floating at the top. We also observed bubbles when water was added to the soil in the vial. And what does that tell you about the soil? What that tells us is that there's air pockets down inside the material the bubbles will come up. Now we're going to observe, and I would like you to draw 4 cylinder shapes at home and draw what you see, and then you could take a picture of it and submit it to me on either Seesaw or email. So this is soil number 1. So you can see it's starting to split up into several different levels. So I want you to draw the best that you can what you see. So it lets you see that there's a lighter material at the bottom and like a sandy material in the middle. And this is like mostly water, but it's very filmy water. Then at the top, you see some black material floating. Okay. Soil number 2. Cool. That's so cool. So it's like sandy on the bottom and like a level layer of lighter. And then you could see some bigger rocks at the top and the hazy water and then some black material at the top. So draw what you see for soil number 2. Soil number 3. Again, you can see it's kind of layered up. This is more like of a mix of things. You can see some like sand and then some clay going on in there. Then we have another level up here of clay, water, and then lots more black material floating at the top. And then soil number 4. Pretty cool. Like a lot more dark material, a little bit of rocks in there, hazy water, and a lot more the black material floating on top. So now that the materials have settled, you're going to draw what you see in the vials. So if you could draw 4 cylinder shapes, label them 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then draw what you see. Now I would like to review vocabulary. Earth material is any natural resource that makes up earth, including soil and water. Pebbles, weathered rock material with particles typically between 6 to 64 millimeters. Gravel, weathered rock materials with particles typically between 2 to 6 millimeters. Sand, weathered rock material with particles typically between 1 to 2 millimeters. Silt, rocks that are smaller than sand but bigger than clay. Clay, rocks that are too small to see without a hand lens. Humus, bits of dead plant and animal parts in the soil. Rock, a solid earth material made of 2 or more minerals. So for your assignment, I would like you to please answer the focus question, what is soil? What did you learn from this investigation? Make sure you use information from the investigation as you're answering the question. Also, part 2 of your assignment, I would like you to see if you can determine where the soil samples came from. Did they come from, now one, per each location. So did the soil come from a desert, a forest, mountains, or a riverbed? So I'm going to show you them again. So soil number 1. Where do you think soil number 1 came from? The desert, forest, mountains, or river? Soil number 2. Where do you think soil number 2 came from? Soil number 3. Soil number 4. Now do your best on this. Don't get stressed out about it. We're going to find out more in the future, but just do your best. Where do you think these different soils came from? Think about where they're located, what materials they're made of. We will be able to be a little bit more confident with this answer in the future, but I just want you to do your best for today. So the 2 assignments for this investigation: answer the focus question, what is soil? And then see if you can determine where the soil samples came from. You could submit them on Seesaw or on email. Thanks.